to get ready. Get ready and then be ready. And then, of course, back in the Old Testament, you have Joel and Amos and their emphases. And I think this is not working right now. Please advance to the next slide. It says, prepare to meet thy God. All important counsel for us today. What I'd like to suggest this morning is that if we're going to be ready and stay ready, we're going to have that translate into our daily activities day after day. It's not something that happens just at the last moment before Jesus comes. It's a daily application of these things. Now, the usual preparation that we think of in getting ready and being ready is a prayer, as in Luke 18:1, that men ought always to pray and not to faint, not to give in to Satan. Spend time, persevere in prayer, pray without ceasing. You know the verses. Highly important in getting ready and being ready. Another very important thing is Bible study. 2 Timothy 3:16, you know the words. Study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So we must study, spend time with it, activate all the resources we can bring to bear with it. And it will be profitable, you recall, for doctrine, reproof, correction, instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect or complete unto all good works. So the second stage of preparation after prayer is Bible study. And then, of course, meditation. Not the Eastern variety where you try to put everything out of your mind and think about nothing, but where you focus on substance, the substance being God and His holy word. 1 Timothy 4:15, meditate on these things. Give yourself entirely to them, that your progress may be evident to all. So spend time with the study of the Word and in prayer. Then, of course, the final step that is sometimes missed is application. Verse 15, take heed to yourself, Paul writes to Timothy and for us, and to the doctrine. Some people say doctrine is important, just relationships. Well, what we're to take heed to, according to Paul, is also doctrine. Continue in them, not once again, on again, gone again, off. Take heed to yourself, continue in them. For in doing this, you will save both yourself and those who are hearing you. So it has an influence that goes far beyond. So the vital addition in preparation is application to our daily life. When we read something in the Bible, what do we do with it? Tuck it away in the back of the mind and say, oh, that's nice to know. Maybe I'll need that someday. Or do we say, Lord, I need that today. Help me to have this in my life present today. Show me where I'm off from this. Help me to get back onto that so I'm in tune with you. Application. In other words, what we learn must become a part of our daily lives. It's not just information, it's character growth that we're talking about. Our attitude must be one of daily yielding to what God teaches us. Not just once a year as we give New Year's resolutions and so on. Daily yielding to what God teaches. Our will must be focused on doing whose will? God's will. Let's look at that familiar thing in Steps to Christ, page 47. One of the most prized books in my whole library is this little volume, just 13 chapters, power-packed, filled with wonderful practical things. Page 47. What you need to understand is the true force of the will. This is the governing power in the nature of man, the power of decision or of choice. Everything depends on what? The right action of the will. The power of choice God has given to man. It's theirs to exercise. You cannot change your heart. You cannot of yourself give to God its affections, but you can choose to serve Him. You can give Him your will. He will then work in you to will and to do according to His good pleasure, Scripture. Thus, your whole nature will be brought under the control of the Spirit of Christ. Your affections will be centered upon Him, Your thoughts will be in harmony with him. That, dear people, is the secret of successful Christian living. It must have a daily application in our lives. Years ago, I became very much interested in Solomon, and it has continued on down through the years. And here's one of the reasons why. He's said to be the wisest man who ever lived. Now that's accepting Jesus, who was man and God, you recall. He wrote Proverbs in his youth, Song of Solomon in his middle years, and Ecclesiastes near life's end. At least that's what some scholars are suggesting. And the fruitage of his study and his wisdom comes to us according to 1 Kings 4:31 in the 300, that is the 3,000 Proverbs that he spoke, and also the 1,005 songs that he wrote. How many songs, Maurice, are in our church hymnal?
Close to 600 and change.
So Solomon almost doubled that. So that was the fruitage of his wisdom. Kings came from all over, and queens, like the Queen of Sheba, just to hear his wisdom. He grew, but then we have another phase of Solomon. He grew proud and stupid, and then discarded his God-given guidance. I use the word stupid because in some translations in Proverbs, that's what it says. And that is the condition that ends up when you disregard the counsels of God. God said, don't multiply wives and horses. So what did he do? He multiplied both. Don't multiply gold and silver. What did he do? He was called the richest man in all of history, probably a trillionaire. You take just that one gift, 666 talents of gold. Let's think how much that would take to deliver all that gold, that long string of camels. That came from the Queen of Sheba alone. So he was multiplied in wisdom for a time, but turned into foolishness, multiplied in wives, and that turned to be a great nightmare for him, and horses. And the horses that he put his trust in were not sufficient. God spared the outcome of his foolishness till the next generation, but Solomon blew it, let's face it. This turned him from the blessings of his earlier days. Now this might be a disputed fact. It's part of my interest in Solomon. He may have died at age 52. We can't pinpoint that exactly, but it says he was 13, he was 12 years old, possibly some, and I don't have the documentation for that, when he accepted the kingship, when David abdicated his throne in favor of Solomon. He ruled for 40 years, so 40 plus 12 is what? 52. Well, it may be a little more than that because there's such a thing as regnal years, accession years, years when he ruled with David. We're not given that detail in Scripture. But say 52 for the sake of today. That's the same lifespan as my father. Both made bad choices in midlife. They chose to, as Frank Sinatra used to sing, do it my way. And they paid a heavy price. Heavy price. Ecclesiastes 12, you know, describes the infirmities of old age. You've read those. The eyes grow dim, the hands tremble, shake, and I add my knees get a little weaker. You might have noticed that. But 52, if he died at 52, what did he know about old age? But he is actually describing what happens when you prematurely age because of neglect of the Word of God. Now, don't apply that to everybody. There are other things come in beyond our help, beyond our scope of control. But it is a general thing. They left, both my father and Solomon, left a heritage of evil for their posterity. Dad lost his family, and Solomon lost his good kingdom. And the sons that followed him, Rehoboam, we can't dwell on today, did foolishness and divided the monarchy, you remember, into two parts. Now, if you want to get a wonderful background on Solomon, get into Prophets and Kings. Page 34 is what we'll focus on right now. But that whole chapter and on, it shows how Solomon missed the opportunities that God gave and what is the result of that. Page 34, wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom. This is from Scripture. And with all thy getting, get understanding. Now, do you know the difference between knowledge, wisdom, and understanding? Knowledge is facts. Understanding is understanding the background of those facts. But wisdom is applying the truth of those facts to your daily life. Solomon makes similar distinctions. So with all you're getting, get understanding, Proverbs 4:7. Again, quoting from Psalm 111:10, his father David, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Fear of the Lord, not trembling fear. Reverential respect, awe, adjusting life's patterns to fit into his plans. Fear of the Lord is to do what? Hate evil, and that's where most of us miss it. We can't be truly wise as long as we love evil and hang on to it. If we hate it like God hates it and love what God loves, that's wisdom. That's wisdom. Fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogance, and the evil way, and the froward mouth do I hate. Proverbs 8:13. Continuing these poignant words, oh, that in later years Solomon had heeded these wonderful words of wisdom. Oh, that he who had declared the lips of the wise dispersed knowledge, and who had himself taught the kings of the earth to render to the King of Kings the praise they desired to give to an earthly ruler, had never with a froward mouth in pride and arrogance taken to himself the glory due to God alone. This is where Solomon lost it. Dear people, this is where human beings are losing it ever since. If you look at the political scene today, and we're not going to get into any details, what do we see? We see a rerun of this very thing, don't we? And what are the consequences of that going to be? The same, given the time for it to develop. Heed, pray, study, yield, follow. Now, Proverbs, interestingly, has 31 chapters. The longest month has 31 days, so a little plan that can be helpful is to read a chapter a day corresponding to the day of the month, and try to, if you get to February 28 and run out, that's no problem. Just read 29, 30, and 31 also. But every day, it's a convenient source for life principles to live by. It's a review. It's a reminder. It's a nudge. This is a little book that some of you might have heard of. Have any of you heard of this book? The Richest Man Who Ever Lived by Stephen K. Scott. I came across this book quite by accident. We had an invitation just a few weeks ago to conduct a memorial service at Andrews University. The husband, Howard Drew, of Mary Alice's first roommate in 1950 there at Emmanuel Missionary College then, now Andrews University, this husband died, and his wife asked if I would come and have the service. Now, she recognized my voice condition and all that, but she said that in the last few years, her husband, Howard, had said, if I die and Glenn is still alive anywhere in the country, be sure to ask him to have my funeral. Now, this was a challenge because our family was coming that very week to celebrate my 85th birthday. So we had lots to do to get ready. But how could you ever turn down a request like that? Yes. Now, it's 714 miles from our place to Andrews University. And we've done that in a day, but we don't choose to do it now if we can help it. Fortunately, our son Glenn just took a call to pastor a district, Springfield and Decatur in Illinois. So they just moved 450 miles from here. So we drove that far, spent the night on Thursday. Friday morning, drove on the rest of the way, spent the weekend with the family, had the funeral Sunday morning. Well, the thing that was important to me to this message is that I came in contact with this book. Someone had just sent, coincidence? I think it was the divine thing, had just sent this book to Debbie, Glenn's wife, along with another book. Just a friend sent it. No reason, no explanation, sent it. And I picked it up and looked at it, became interested in it, and said, do you mind if I borrow this? And she was happy to say, I can't read it now. I'm too busy unpacking. You bring it back and read it. So I came in touch with this book. It's called The Richest Man Who Ever Lived. It's written by Stephen K. Scott. Now, Stephen K. Scott is a man who is noted to himself, he expresses it in the book, as a great failure, and then following that as a great success. What made the difference? Stephen Scott lost the first 9 jobs that he'd had after college. Lost them. He was fired. And he wondered, why? What's wrong? His marriage was going south, and his kids were not as interested in him as they should have been. Things were crumbling in on Stephen Scott. So he had a friend, Gary Smalley. Some of you know that name. Marriage counselor. He's written a lot of books. Well, Gary came to his house and heard his story of woe, and in response to his request for advice, Gary said, let me sleep on it tonight. And he stayed there that night and give you an answer in the morning. I want to pray about it. In the morning, what Gary told Stephen was, Stephen, if you will take the book of Proverbs and study it a chapter a day, when you finish, start over again next month, do that, it will change your life. And if you follow those principles, I predict that in 5 years you will be a millionaire. Now, I'm not promising that to everybody. But he says, I think I will try. He studied for 2 years, wrote this book at the end of the 2 years, putting down in a condensed form about a fifth of the Proverbs that he quotes and how they come together into various topics. Let's take a look at his story. Stephen Scott's story. I said a little bit about it here a moment ago. But before he learned and applied Solomon's principle, remember this is God's principle through Solomon, applied it to his own life, he lost his first 9 jobs after college. His wages were half the normal, $18,000 a year. That's what he made. And he was diagnosed a hopeless corporate failure with a success rate of 0%. Now, he was in the advertising business. He was writing commercials for television ads, and they were failing. But then he paid attention to what God gave through Solomon. And as a result, his income rose from $18,000 a year to more than $7 million. He had a 29-year career success rate of 60% in an industry where 1% is average. And I hope that I can remember to tell you further in this sermon about one incident and what he did following Solomon's advice that made the difference. When he learned but did not apply these Bible principles, what happened to him? He lost millions of dollars through bad decisions. Well, I'll just go into that right now. He ignored the counsel of God through Solomon. In a multitude of counselors, there's what? Safety. And also Solomon says, he that follows his own heart is a fool. So he had someone come to him and say, here's a sure, won't fail business opportunity. If you can just borrow money and invest in this, it will be quadrupled in a matter of a few months. Now his wife said, don't do it. His business partner said, don't do it. His financial counselor said, don't do it. But he says, and admits in the book, I followed my own way. I did it my way. I did it. And soon he lost everything. Everything. He should have learned. Twice after that, he lost his total life savings by ignoring that principle. His daughter lost her life savings by ignoring his counsel. So that's the result of bad choices. His marriage failed. They were unhappy. His children became estranged. But these were restored and improved when he returned to the Bible principles of life. And that's what I hope we will feel today and understand individually for ourselves. Here are some of the benefits that he lists now for following Bible strategies. These are his: knowledge, discretion, good judgment, preservation and protection, success, better health, longer life, honor, financial abundance, favor of those in authority, commendation and promotions, financial independence, confidence, strength of character, courage, extraordinary achievement, personal fulfillment, great relationships, a truly meaningful life, love and admiration of others, understanding and true wisdom. And he also understands the value and the absolute necessity of a strong spiritual life. All these things might be nice, but eternal life through relationship with God tops them all, of course. What Stephen learned and applied to his life was that true success comes from following God's ways.
Amen.
In contrast with that, Proverbs 14:12 and 16:25 say, what do they say? Well, let's read it. Here's the positive. Proverbs 3:1-4 first. My son, do not forget my law, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and long life and peace they will add to you. Are these benefits we'd like to have? Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them around your neck. That's more than just putting a reminder around your neck. Make it personal. Write them on the tablet of your heart. And so do what? Find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man. So there are benefits of this life as well as the life to come. Continuing on, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Let's read this one together. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. When we don't do that, what can be the result? There is a way which seems right to a man. I did it my way. I did what's right in my own eyes, followed my heart, felt good, but its end is the way of death. Can we learn anything from Solomon? Let's look at some examples that groups together some of the Proverbs into categories. Examples for success. Number one is diligence. What is diligence? Proverbs 22:29 says, do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. So he will rise to prominence, even in this life. Diligence. Diligence, as Stephen Scott compiles it, says, diligence is a learnable skill that combines creative persistence, that's in Proverbs, a smart working effort, rightly planned, and rightly performed in a timely, efficient, and effective manner to attain a result that is pure and of the highest quality of excellence. He illustrates that with a personal story. When he was in college, Stephen was made in charge of a ROTC platoon. They drill, they practice things so when they get into the military, they will excel. Well, in this college, they had several platoons, and one particular platoon had a leader that was very good. Everyone expected that in the competition they would have at the end of the school year, that team was the one that's going to win, that platoon. Stephen noticed that they came out at 6 o'clock every morning to practice for an hour every morning. So began to think about Proverbs and some of these things. He decided to come out with his group, and they all agreed, at 6 o'clock in the morning. The others came at 7 for an hour. He came an hour early. No one else was on the parade ground, so he had plenty of room to do ample extensions, teach them more things than they could in the cramped conditions with the others there. So the others were practicing diligently, an hour a day. His group practiced 2 hours a day. When it came to the test, the favorite team came in second. Stephen's group came in first. 300 points were possible. His group had 287 points out of the 300. And the favored team barely made it to 168 points. Diligence, diligence. It'll work in more ways than just ROTC. He mentions that even a child is known by his deeds, by whether what he does is pure and right. Now, pure can mean things like morally correct, pure life. It can also work in its purest form, like gold melted out from the ore, the purification of the process. Pure and right. Doing your work expeditiously, efficiently, and smart. Right way to do it. Bringing creativity, persistence, and even other people and outside resources to achieve an extraordinary outcome. What are the rewards of that? Well, here's what he lists. Can you read through me on the screen on this? Should I walk over here? I like to hang on to the pulpit, but I want you to be able to see. What are some of the rewards of diligence? One is you gain an advantage. What does it say? Proverbs 21:5. The plans of the diligent lead surely to what? But those of everyone who is hasty, surely to poverty. So we gain an advantage by being diligent. Second, personal control, Proverbs 12:24. The hand of the diligent will rule, but the slothful will be put to forced labor. If you don't rule by your own guidance, God's guidance, then someone with a whip will lead you to what you must do. Third, true fulfillment, Proverbs 13:4. The soul of a sluggard desires and has nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made what? Rich. Here's some more rewards. Respect and admiration from those in authority. Bible examples, Daniel, Joseph. We can't go into those today. You know the stories. They were diligent in what they did for the people they worked for, even though it wasn't a pleasant situation always. But that diligence paid off, and God honored it, and they rose to positions of prominence, even in the eyes of the secular people around them. Another reward is your needs will be satisfied. It says, that he who tills his land will have plenty of bread, who has a garden. But he who follows frivolity will have poverty enough. Contrast diligent labor with frivolity, spending your time, doing it your way, what pleases you, just what comes to mind, no vision, no plan, no purpose. Another one is ever-increasing success. Wealth gained by what? Dishonesty will be diminished. Diminished, but he who gathers by labor will increase. He mentions one group. I hesitate to mention names, but you remember the Enron scandal? They lied about their financial standing, and as a result lost millions. One man committed suicide. Their investors multiplied millions of dollars. Dishonesty. Openness and integrity. Another of the 7 rewards. Your efforts will be profitable. In all labor, there is profit. Now, labor has various forms. We know that. Mind labor, hand labor. But labor, something you invest time in your person into, rather than just something handed to you, simply because you're there, a sense of entitlement. I'll do what I want. I'm entitled to a living. People will support me. I don't need to do anything. That's what Proverbs calls as sloth. Applying diligence to any area of life, marriage, parenting, Bible study, and so on, always brings profit and satisfaction. Now, going back to the Proverbs 14:23, in all labor there is profit, but what? Idle chatter, lots of it around, leads only to poverty. So what's Solomon saying? There are consequences of not being diligent. One, you'll be ruled, put to forced labor. You'll crave but not get. You'll lack understanding. You'll be void, vain. Your wealth and security will dissipate. Gain by dishonesty will be diminished. Your efforts will come to nothing. Idle chatter leads only to poverty. Let's quickly take a look at some root causes of laziness, because we want time to get into another phase. One is self-centeredness. Proverbs 21:2. Every way of a man is right in where? His own eyes. You remember Proverbs? You remember the book of Judges? What's the theme of the book of Judges? Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. There was no standard that they were brought into account for. There was, but they neglected it. They ignored it. The will of God was not in their mind. Personal pleasure was. So self-centeredness. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes. We should ask what we can do that would be the best interest of all who are affected. I want to tell you a story that comes out of this. There was a man that the pastor was asked to visit. It's the pastor of Stephen, by the way. His wife asked him to come, this pastor, and talk to her husband. By outward appearances, he was a very successful man. He was the CEO of a corporation that had 3,000 employees. But everybody hated him. His family barely tolerated him. He was so self-centered, so conceited. So as he came and the pastor was there talking with him, this man said, "Pastor, I've made myself what I am." Pastor could have said, "No, that relieves God of a great responsibility if you're a self-made man." He said, "I've made myself what I am. Nobody's helped me. My parents never gave me a dime." And so on and on. Pastor, listen, I'd like to ask you some questions. You say, nobody ever helped you. Who changed your diapers? Who fed you when you were a baby? Who gave you your first work? Who sent you to school? Who provided the food you ate? Who cleaned the house that you lived in? Who cleans the toilets in your corporation now? Who fixes the food in the cafeteria? And it hit the man like a ton of bricks. He was totally contrite. He broke into tears and he said, "Pastor, I get it. I've seen. What a fool I've been." And that man changed in that very hour. He determined that he was going to do it God's way. He followed through. You know what he did? He wrote a personal letter to every one of his 3,000 employees, thanking them for their part in what made the business successful. He did that with every other person that he could think of. He was recognizing a very fundamental principle. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. People around us today need to learn that too, don't they? So conceit. The sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. So we should seek out advice of several wise counselors before taking action. I learned this a little hard way, and I told about it in an earlier sermon some time ago, where we were working outside at our place. Mary Alice was down in the lower part. I was up there at the house. We were both raking and working, and somebody came to Mary Alice and said, "Now we are people who lay down driveways. We have asphalt, and we have a little left over from the last job. If you would be able to use that in some way, we'll give you a real good price on it." Well, what Mary Alice said was, "Go and talk to my husband." She was following Solomon's advice. The man came, and what he didn't say was, Mary Alice said, "Talk to your husband." What he said was, "Your wife favors this." And I fell into the trap, and I did go down and talk to her. And so my desire to do good and help people was a disadvantage here. I said, "Well, you have a little bit. We'll find a place where you can put it. We can use it somewhere." I didn't need it, didn't want it, but I would help him that much. What I didn't know was that they immediately ordered 2 more truckloads, which came, and they were all bulldozing out the drive, didn't put down the gravel like you're supposed to, said there's already gravel under it, don't need it, laid this, and went on and on and on. I kept saying, "Look, this is beyond what I can handle. Don't. Oh, we'll give you a good price," so on. So when they came to the end, it came to $14,000. I had a dilemma. What are you going to do? Laid it. I tried to protest, but they still went on. So, what shall you do? Well, go to the bank. Went to the bank, and fortunately, it was later in the day. They wanted to pay right now, of course. Go to the bank, and the bank says, "No, we can't loan you that tonight. It'll have to be tomorrow morning." And they says, "Are you sure this is a reputable company?" They'd had reports from others, you see, who've been scammed by this very kind of people. So, when they left, and they were back bright and early the next morning, I'll tell you, there's the reason. When they left, my wife and I took a tape and measured the length of the driveway that they had put down and the width, and compared it with what they had told us. And there was 100 feet difference and about 1.5 foot difference in the width, which adds up to thousands of dollars. What he did was he had one of these wheels, and he wheeled out through the path, and then he showed me at the end what it was. But he didn't show me the beginning, so I believed what he said, and yet I had suspicions. So anyway, when he came back the next morning, I confronted him. I says, "I have a bone to pick." I said, "It's not as long as you claimed it was." "Oh," and so he put on his act. He threw down the wheel, said, "Bad, I'll have to go back and make this right with the other people." Blamed it on the wheel, not on his mind. Well, I went on a little further, and I told him how it was wider than what a drive actually was. And I said, I also have some friends I'd like to come and help. So I called Jeff Quam. The Lord was intervening. You know, the Lord helps the foolish. So he answered his phone. Jeff Quam, he works in construction. And he rarely answers his phone when he's on the job, but he did. I told him what was happening. He said, I'll come right away. He did. Jeff knew. He was a counselor I should have talked to before. But under the haste, another thing, you don't want to do that. So Jeff came, and he had another friend he wanted to bring who was in that business. Ken was his name. Together, they assessed the job. They assessed what it should have cost, the cost of the materials. Jeff, I shouldn't tell you this, but Jeff says, if you don't mind, I'd like to tear into that fellow and knock him to pieces. I says, no, Jeff, I don't think that's the solution to our problem. But I took his counsel, and the other fellow confirmed it. I says, Jeff said, you don't owe him a dime. To tell him to get off your property. They tried to cheat you. That should be their lesson. I said, no, I don't want them to lose money, but I don't want them to make any either. So I learned how much it cost, $2,500 for materials, nothing for labor. That's what I paid. Fellow put on a big scene, you know, he said, oh, I'll tell the sheriff. I said, wonderful, go, I'd love to talk to him. I know, he says, I'll bring a lawyer. I said, which one? I know both of them down in Gentry. He said, the Justice of the Peace. Yes, I'd love to explain this. So finally I says, I'll give you a chance to take this check and go, or you can go without the check. He grabbed the check and walked off. Cashed it before he left town. The Lord intervened. The driveway is breaking up some now. That we've had several years of good service. It's been a blessing. The Lord blessed in spite of the foolishness. But you see what we're learning here? Go to your counselors before you make decisions. Then your decisions are going to come out better. Then it says, conceit. The sluggard is wiser in his own mind than 7 men who can answer sensibly. Seek out advice. Foolishness. Now that's ignorance and irresponsibility. The two of them are part of foolishness. I went to the field of the slothful, and by the vineyard of the man devoid of understanding, and there it was, all overgrown with thorns. The surface was covered with nettles. The stone wall was broken down. What's that a result of? Sloth, laziness. It's easier to act out of ignorance than to become educated, isn't it? Natural tendency, human heart. Even worse is irresponsibility, which is knowing what to do and then choosing not to do it. Solomon lumps them together and calls it what? Sloth, educated, ignorance. Laziness results in more laziness. Proverbs 20, verse 4. The sluggard will not plow because of winter. Therefore, he will beg during the harvest and have nothing. Laziness creates a painful barrier to personal achievement. The way of the slothful man is an hedge of thorns, but the way of the upright is a highway. So what's Solomon's success secrets? God's, actually. Number one, we're on to something there, Morris. We were on the same page, your Sabbath school program and what we're doing here. Wake up to reality. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? And I thought of this, Morris, as you were telling about choosing to serve again or turn over in bed and sleep instead. Yes. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty, spiritual or otherwise, come on you like a robber, and your need like an armed man. So what's the message? Wake up and stop procrastinating. Then we should define our visions. You know, Proverbs 29:18 says, without a vision, the people perish. I think that can be two kinds of vision. Prophetic vision, which we've always thought of. If we don't listen to what God says through the prophets, we will have problems. But it could also mean we don't have a personal vision. We just float along. We just go with it. We don't sit down and plan and think and ask God to bring in the things that we need to make it successful. So the next step is effectively partner. In Proverbs 15:13, without counsel, plans go awry. But in the multitude of counselors, they are established. So seek qualified people who know by experience. Now, let me go back to Stephen again. said he was fired from the first 3 jobs. I mean, the first 9 jobs after college. 6 years, 9 jobs lost. The 3rd job that fired him had a kindly assistant CEO. After he was fired, this man came and he said, "Stephen, would you like to go out to lunch with me? I'd like to visit with you." So he went and they talked and he served a good meal for him out in a restaurant somewhere. He tried to console him in his loss. He asked, "What are you going to do next? What's your next job?" Well, he was scheduled to be one of the people at a bank. And he says, "Well, what are you going to wear to that job? You know, clothes are important in a position like that. Assistant manager in a bank." "I don't really have a good suit." He said, "Well, come with me." So he went to a warehouse and he bought him 2 new suits, sent him on his way, and encouraged him. And so as a result of that, later, Stephen partnered with this man in a business that became successful so much that in the first year it made millions of dollars. Another experience that he shared was when he wrote a commercial for television and his boss very abruptly said, "It isn't any good, it's no good, it lacks something," and walked off. Now Stephen was hurt, his problem. What should he do about it? Well, fortunately, he called the man back and he says, "Would you please tell me what you see is wrong with it?" He says it has no catch line. It has no hook is the word he used. You only have 30 seconds or maybe 60 or even 120 in that ad to catch the attention, to hold it, to just get him interested in what you have versus what he already has, and all these things. It has to catch him right now. Stephen went back and wrote a new one. Instead of leaving and pouting, he wrote a new one, and that's the one that prospered and brought the millions. And they continued on. So, effectively partner. Don't be ashamed to ask people. Don't think you know it all. Expect others to know as much or more than you on a particular subject especially. Bring them in. Pursue wisdom. Build your life upon it. Proverbs 16:16. How much better it is to get wisdom than what? What are people chasing today mostly? Gold. And to get understanding is to be chosen rather than silver. So let's put priorities in our day. Begin the day with God. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. Spend some time in Proverbs as well as the gospel, spirit of prophecy, the whole Bible, which illustrates, fleshes out. Now we're going to have to quickly cover this one, but it's so important. I just will do it. Greed is a deep longing for something that drives us to do whatever it takes to acquire it. Now that's a very sophisticated definition, isn't it, of greed? Don't we often think of greed, "Oh, I'd like something, I'm hungry for it, I want it." But it goes deeper. It's a deep longing for something that drives us to do whatever it takes to acquire it. Not what you want, but how badly you want it. What are the consequences? It can steal your life away. Proverbs, so are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. It takes away the life of its owners, so it steals away your life. This man we were talking about, greed, CEO, 3,000 employees, self-conceited, proud, stole his life, his family, everything. He was lost. All he had was gold, and you can't eat gold. Well, he came to his senses, fortunately. It also can destroy your financial security. A man with an evil eye hastens, key word, after riches. Quick get-rich schemes, jump on board. Look what you'll have. Play the lottery. How many are doing it? Powerball, millions. Oh, I'm just putting in a few dollars, not realizing that those few dollars over a long time could add up to enough to make an investment that would be good. So it can destroy your financial security. Does not consider that poverty will come upon him. It can affect your loved ones. He who is greedy for gain troubles his own house. We see it again and again, don't we, in the world around us. People who have everything, but they throw it away, their family. Pursue their life in pursuit of gain and wealth, and spend that wealth in the last half trying to get the health back that they lost pursuing the wealth. It can bankrupt you spiritually. There's one who makes himself rich, yet has nothing. Stewardship. One who makes himself poor, grasping, Well, no, that's not stewardship. One who makes himself rich, that's greed. Yet has nothing, loses family, health, many things. And one who makes himself poor because he gives it away, he helps others. Yet has great riches, not just financially, but spiritual. Remember Howard Hughes had it all, he had thought, ended up in a miserable, miserable condition.
Yes.
Howard Hughes. Airlines were not enough. Well, achieving success without greed is focus on achievement rather than money. If your focus is money, that's what you'll get. If you focus on achievement, that's what you can get too. Spiritually, developing character, growth, and the things that really matter in life. In all labor, there is profit, but idle chatter leads only to poverty. Use your labor, not shortcuts, to develop wealth. Those shortcuts can be deadly, have been for many. No shortcuts. Don't try to get rich. Do not overwork to be rich. Long hours, overtime, wonderful opportunity. I just got to do it. Look how fast I can gain money. But when it all settles down and the dust is gone, you lose by overworking to be rich. Because of your own understanding, cease. Will you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away like an eagle toward heaven. And finally, achievement. Achieving the right way brings no sorrow with it. The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. So let's ask ourselves, is our success cause us to lose our spouse, our children, our values, our ethics, or our integrity? If so, greed has probably been a driving force. How to overcome it? Develop a trust-based relationship with God. That's Proverbs 3 we looked at. Second, focus on giving generously to others. That's the antidote. Well, I'm tempted to tell stories, and our time is running out. John D. Rockefeller, rich, was dying early. And the doctor told him he had only 6 months to live. He had millions, richest man in the world at the time, perhaps. But he began to decide he was going to give it away. He started giving. And you know what? His health improved. He lived to be 97, I believe, or 98. So stop chasing riches, because we become what we dwell on. Remember Jesus' words, beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in what? The abundance of the things he possesses. We're trying to downsize at our house. We should have done it years ago. Reasons why we didn't. I found in this book the story that I'd heard years ago and wondered if it was really true. It is. Knows the man who went to the circus and saw it happen. Man who was a snake trainer, and he entered a cage with a giant snake, a python. And the plan of the program, the entertainment, was that the python would wrap itself around him, and then at the given signal from the man, it would unwrap, and the man would walk out, showing mind over snake. But on this particular day that Stephen's friend was there watching, the python didn't pick up the cue to unwind. Instead, he kept tightening. And the audience could see his eyes bulge, his face was pale, and finally they heard his bones crunch. And he was dead by the time another trainer got into the cage. What he thought is he had trained the snake. What he didn't realize, that the snake's nature is a snake's nature. So greed is like that. We have to take gigantic steps to avoid it. And the things we've talked about can do that. Fortunately, and this is what we want to close with positively, fortunately, our nature can change. A snake's does not. Ours can. You know the words, 2 Corinthians 3:18. Read them together. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord. So what do we conclude? A faithful daily study of Proverbs, along with the rest of the Bible, of course, can remind us of the powerful principles that we may live by as we prepare to meet the Lord. Day by day, ready, be ready, stay ready. All the Bible illustrates these principles. And the spirit of prophecy enlarges and gives background and application for our lives today. We need time in both. So let's study to show ourselves approved unto God, 2 Timothy 1:15. Use our wills to choose God's way in each day's decisions. Then we need not be ashamed when Jesus returns to take his own to eternity. Is that what you want in your life today? Would you raise your hand with mine? Let's sing of it as we close. 580. Trust and obey. 590. Maurice?